Hi everyone. The previous video talked about how to make the graphs in Excel, or excuse me, Google Sheets. But now we're going to talk about how to find descriptive statistics. So something else I want you to figure out about your data is how do you find the mean, median, mode, IQR, range, outliers, variance, standard deviation, quartile, decile, and percentile of a chosen data point with a z-score, and then you're going to put it all in a final document. So I'm going to talk about how to bring it all together and come up with these descriptive statistics. But we'll start with the descriptive statistics first. So to find the descriptive statistics, what you can do is you can open a new Google Sheet. And I'm just going to title it, actually I have one already open, but that's okay. So I'm just going to title it Descriptive Statistics in Google. But you'll probably say something else. Statistics in Google. All right. And what you need to do is you need to type in your actual data. So I had bowling scores, if you remember. And the bowling scores that I have a file with them in it, or at least most of them in it. So for instructional purposes, I'm just going to quickly type in these. So my bowling scores are the following. And notice that I'm typing in each individual data point. So if there's even a repeat, I make sure to type it twice. Every single data point that you have, you just type in, and you should have at least 30 of these, right? Because you should have at least 30 scores. And I only have 15, but you can do the same thing for 15 that you would for 30. Okay, but I don't think you need to see me type in 15 more numbers. So basically what you're going to do is there's a descriptive statistic you have to find. Now some of these descriptive statistics you can find by hand easily on your own. You don't need the computer, but some of them, the computer is very, very useful. So if we go back to our project assignment, it says we need to find the mean, median, mode, IQR. So mean, median, mode, IQR, range, outliers, variance, range, outliers, variance, standard deviation was on there, I'm pretty sure. And okay, and then we have the chosen data point, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. Right. Something I'm also going to want you to do is identify the shape of your data, which you can get from the histogram itself. All right. And I'll put chosen data point down here. So this is quartile, decile, percentile, and z-score. All right. So let's type all of this in. And let's try to find these. So first of all is the mean. Now you could get a calculator out. You could add all those together and divide by, you're going to have 30, which will take a little bit of time, but this is something that's cool. If you press the equal sign here in a cell, and then you type in the word average, okay, it gives you what it's talking about. So this is a numerical average value in a data set ignoring text. So if I just put a parenthesis here, and then highlight, click and drag, highlight your data. So you'll click and drag 30 data points. Close my parenthesis. There it is. That's the mean. Very cool, huh? The median is also has a function. Just type in the word median. That's the median of my data set. The mode also has a function. Okay, which is 148. Now, you have to be careful with mode because it'll give the first mode, which I do have two 148s, but I also have two 169s and I have two 182s. So this is one I would probably want to do by hand and not just depend on the computer with, because you may have multiple modes within your data set. If all of your data points occur once, then you have no mode. Okay, IQR. So if you remember, IQR is the third quartile minus the first quartile. So if you type in quartile, you can highlight the data and then press a comma, I believe. And remember, there's 3 quartiles. So if I do quartile 1, that should give me the first quartile, and it does. So this is the first quartile, okay? But I don't want to just stop there. I want the third quartile as well, because the third quartile is what I need to subtract from. So what I did is I put the quartile, I highlighted my data, I put comma 3, and then I put a minus, quartile, highlight my data, comma 1, and there you go. There's my interquartile range. Okay, range is pretty easy. It's just maximum minus minimum. There actually is a max function. You could do max minus min. Oops. Min. And it'll give it to you. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't need to because it's pretty easy to subtract the largest minus the smallest. Outliers. Now, outliers is something that you're going to have to find on your own. And I don't believe Google has an outliers function, but I'm curious, so I'm going to type it in. And it doesn't. So what you're going to need to do is use our rules, or maybe there's just a data point that's just obviously an outlier. And remember, you can use your IQR rule, multiply that by 1.5, and add it to the third quartile, subtract it from the first quartile if there's data points outside that. Or if there's any data that is outside 2 standard deviations from the mean, you can also use that as a rule for outliers. So this is definitely one that you're going to have to do manually. So manually calculate. I'll just write here. And you can look back in your notes to find those. Variance. Now, this is one that is especially useful for the computer, because if you remember the variance and standard deviation formula, variance, you had to make those columns, especially with 30 data points, it's going to be a mess. But with variance, you can just type in VAR. Now, there's a few things that you have to keep in mind. So VARP is the variance of a population. VARA is the variance of a sample. So we want VARA because that, we want VARA because that is going to be the variance of a sample. And that's what we have, right? We have a sample. Same thing with standard deviation, equals STDEV, and I think we want the A again. Yeah, standard deviation of a sample. And remember, you can double check this. If I square this number or take the square root of the variance, I should get the standard deviation. So actually, just to show you guys, just to see that if this is correct or not, I can get the calculator out here. So I can put in 240.642. That's enough. And then I can just take the square root of that, and it's 15.512. And yeah, it's very close, right? So those should be, the standard deviation should be the square root of the variance, or the variance should be the standard deviation squared. Now, the shape of your data, you're going to have to look at your histogram. If you look at your histogram, your shape of your data is going to be skewed left, right, or might be symmetric. This one looks a little skewed right to me because there's taller bars on the left side, and then you have it slowly tapers off to the right. So this looks more skewed right than anything. Now, there might not be a category you can specifically put your data in, but for our purposes, it's okay to say something like mostly symmetric, maybe slightly skewed right. It's okay to say something like nearly uniform or skewed right. I mean, it could be a combination, but I would say mine is skewed right. I don't think it's really symmetric. All right, and that's how you find the descriptive statistics of all your data sets. So you have to find at least these descriptive statistics about your data set. Okay? Now, the chosen data point. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose a data point. Tell me what that is. So I'm just going to choose the data point of my last bowling score, which was 300. I'm just kidding. No, I never bowled 300. 145, let's say, was my last bowling score. Actually, that's a bad example because 145 isn't even my data set because I'm awful at bowling. So I'm just going to say 180, although I don't think I've ever bowled a 180 because I'm pretty bad at it. But anyway, so 180. So we want to find out what the closest quartile, decile, and percentile is to 180. Well, if you recall, to find the nearest percentile, let's start with percentile first. We count the number of data points that are less than 180, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and we divide that by the total number of data points, which is 15. So this is 9. Actually, we're going to do this equals 9 divided by 15. And we're going to multiply that by 100. And that gives us 60. So this is the 60th percentile. Okay? And we could do this with all of them. But instead of just that, we can do 9 divided by 15 and multiply by 4. That's the quartile. Now you're going to round to the closest, so it's the second quartile. And then we can do 9 divided by 15 and multiply by 10. And that's the 6th decile, which makes sense because really this decile should just be a tenth of the percentile. Okay? And the z-score for this data point is how many standard deviations the data point is away from the mean, if you go back to your z-score. So to calculate z-score, what you can do is take your chosen data point, we subtract the mean, and we divide by our standard deviation. And that's the z-score of my data point, which is 0.65844, and so on. So my data point of 180 is 0.658. The data point does not have to be in your data set. So notice how I chose 180. It could be, but it doesn't have to. So maybe you did something interesting with your project that relates to you, and maybe you want to put yourself in the data set and say, I want to compare myself to these people, or compare something to your data set, and I want to compare myself maybe where would I be in this data set? And that could be your chosen data point to see where you would be. So this is the descriptive statistics and chosen data point part of the project. And that is this part right here. Okay? Now, what you're going to do now is combine this all together. So I'm actually going to make, I think, a separate video. Yeah, I'll make a separate video with this, just quickly explaining how to put it all together. So make all this first, and then I'll explain how to put the graphs and the descriptive statistics together to make it look all nice and stuff. Okay?